All right, so good afternoon, everybody. It is great to be with you. And of course, feel free to turn on your video if you want to, Barry, no worries if not. But great to see or have you all here. I'm for the next hour, however long we take, we will kind of go through the Jewish wedding ceremony and what it's all about and why. And given that we're an intimate crew, if you have particular questions, let's just talk as we go. Sound good?
Perfect. Sure.
Sounds great. Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. It says Jewish weddings, Mazel Tov. Great. So obviously it's a joyous time. We have a lot of times we get together for life cycle events in the Jewish tradition, and a wedding is always time for joy. Are you it says my screen is paused. Did you move on to the next one to possible pre-wedding? No, you didn't.
We don't see the
It just says loading.
loading.
Loading is not good. Let's try one more time. I'm going to try it one more time. Hi, Lorraine. I'm just
Hi,
going to...
Rabbi.
Hi. I'm going to start the share one more time to make sure it truly... it's mostly pictures, so if we end up not using it, it's fine. But... okay. All right. I will share. I opened it, reopened it. I'm going to share one more time. And if not, I can share it not in presenter mode. And I think it will probably work that way. Okay. So you should be able to see it now.
Yes, we do.
And if I turn it, no. So when I turn it into presenter mode, it doesn't allow me to show it that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it off the presenter mode, and you can just see it the way you can see it the other way. And we'll go from there, and that's okay. Let's do it one more time, just to be sure. So I'm going to share it one more time, and this time I'm just going to keep it where you can see everything on this side and just kind of turn it. You see the next thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So it won't look like presentation mode, but you'll go with me. It's fine. Okay. So I'm just going to start with before the wedding. We're going to mostly talk about what happens in a Jewish wedding, what makes a Jewish wedding Jewish. But I'm going to start with a series of pre-wedding rituals that you can incorporate. One can incorporate, or you may see when you're going to celebrate someone else's wedding. And of course, there's a spectrum of different pre-wedding rituals, depending on if one is coming from a Mizrahi background, a Sephardi background, an Ashkenazic background. And so you may have seen, here's a picture of like a henna engagement party that's especially like in Moroccan communities like that. You may see this. It's a gorgeous dress and putting on of henna prior to the wedding. If you or have Ashkenazic background, this is actually a little less common nowadays, but there used to be a ritual called Tanaim. Tanaim means like terms or conditions, and it was the kind of betrothal, pre-engagement party where different terms were drawn up, and one actually drops a plate and breaks a plate, kind of almost creating these bookends to the breaking of the glass later on. I actually did this myself with my now husband. We did this when we were at our engagement party. We broke a plate and we created a letter of commitment to one another, and so we try to modernize it. But back in the day, breaking something could be a sign of ironically of coming together, right? Another ritual, especially in the Ashkenazic word, because this word Ashkenazic world, because this word is Yiddish, is an ufruf, right? So oftentimes, one of the ways that one can bring honor to an upcoming wedding is by having an ufruf. So on the Shabbat prior to a wedding, sometimes it's a couple Shabbatot beforehand, but so usually the Shabbat beforehand, at a Saturday morning service, a Shabbat morning service, the couple could get an aliyah. Traditionally, it would be, in a heteronormative relationship. It would be a male, right? So especially in traditional synagogue, it would be a male coming up, but especially in our synagogues, it can be both members of the couple, no matter what their gender are, can come up to get an aliyah. Traditionally at Isaiah and in a lot of Reform communities, the ofruf actually happens, because ofruf is like the word aliyah, means to go up, to come up. But oftentimes in a community like ours, where we don't have as many community aliyot to Torah, we actually have a Friday night blessing instead. So you'll often see that there. In fact, if you'd like to, we have an ufruf coming up in a week for our director of early childhood education, Courtney Ludlow, who's getting married to Oz Hussein. So if you want to come and see an ufruf, you can see what happened in not this Shabbat, but the Shabbat following. Another common ritual before a wedding is for a couple to go to mikvah. So either separately or together. It's just a chance for a mikvah is like a ritual bath, a ritual water experience to get someone ready for a time of transition, to either mark transition that has happened or mark transition that's about to happen. And so being able to immerse in Mayim Chaim and living waters is a great way to say, I am ready for a new step in my life. For myself, I brought a whole group of women. We went to the mikveh together. I immersed and they were there to celebrate with joy. And it's just a really beautiful ritual for folks of all genders to be able to go and do that. And then another pre-wedding ritual is what we call like a tish, which are a table, like a celebration that can either be, again, can be for any gender. Traditionally, there was a groom's tish in the past. It was time for being together, a drink or two. And Sue, I saw your hand up in the air.
Oh, I didn't know a mikvah was for men as well.
Well, so in Reform tradition and in the tradition of Rabbi Perlman, I would say every gender is certainly welcome. So traditionally, a woman will go. Yes, traditionally it would be a woman, and folks of any gender can certainly go. Yes, Lorraine.
So are the local mikvahs welcome men?
Yeah. Oh, yes, yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
cool.
Absolutely. So one day we may have a mikvah on campus. That's something that we
Hope so.
no spoiler alert there, but yeah, we're hoping to one day do that. But for we do have there is a community mikvah that Temple Isaiah that we use in Oakland, and if that's something folks are interested in, usually a member of the clergy can call and set that up for someone in particular. And I think individuals can also call and set that up if needed. Yes.
So in South Africa, no matter whether you were religious, not religious, just if you were Jewish and having a Jewish wedding, the women would gather at the bride's house and the men at the groom's house. And from there go to the synagogue, or most of them were in the synagogue in those days anyway. But that's definitely a tradition, and the plate breaking as well.
And so that was something you saw.
Yeah. And
We
like
don't
I
see
said,
it as
they
much
still
here.
do it. Yeah, and it has nothing to do with how religious you are or not.
Yeah. And there's usually a period of time, right? It's not like right beforehand or anything like that. It's usually
Well, no,
oh, you
but
did it there
the table was right
right
before,
beforehand.
and the women, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so often that you may have, if we're talking about a bride and a groom, but again, doesn't have to. But traditionally, you will have definitely the separation of the two, with there definitely being, especially the groom's room is particularly raucous, and
And everybody's drinking.
everybody's drinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't put it on here, but also a fast is common for the groom, in particular for the couple. Everyone else is drinking, but in terms of food intake, right before the wedding. is something that folks will do. So this is all the pre-wedding, right? To kind of to get us ready. And if you are planning or celebrating soon, or someone in your family, right? These are all things that one could potentially bring in, or just good to know if you get invited to a henna party or a plate breaking or a tish. So, all right. So, sometimes a ketubah signing ceremony is integrated into a wedding, into the whole ceremony itself, but usually it is placed right beforehand. And so here's, one example of a more modern looking ketubah here with the watercolor. But what's here, it's a little hard to see obviously in this image, but there's Hebrew and there's English on here. And usually this is done separately beforehand, or like I said, it can be integrated into a service. But a ketubah traditionally, again, from a heteronormative point of view is, how many, goats and sheep and whatnot, and, are being essentially traded for or given as a gift, right? More kindly for the bride, and what the obligations are for her. It's really especially in a traditional sense, one is taught a ketubah, it's right under your pillow, your bride keeps that because it's her way, to ensure that she gets what she needs. And so a traditional text will say things like that, and some folks will opt for that traditional text, again, out of a sense of tradition. But a lot of folks with weddings that I officiate these days, use a more modern text that usually speaks of commitment to one another, love, partnership, the dual responsibility between each member of the couple, no matter what gender they are, right, and what's happening. So usually that is what we will see today. Witnesses are another big part of what this is about, and a witness is, because this is a legal document, right? That's why we have witnesses, to say this has actually happened and this is, binding. And but I like to think about witnesses, especially when it comes to this type of document, is it's an opportunity to say we're not alone in this. Of course, a marriage is really about the two individuals in it at the end of the day, but marriage is also meant to be supported by those around them. Traditionally, one should not be a family member who signs it, because the hope is family is there to hold you up, right? And so now you're extending the circle of responsibility even further out for other folks to be able to turn to. I always say to the witnesses when something is signed like that, take this very seriously, right? Like usually it's a more intimate group together, look, so it's family, bridal party, witnesses, right? Look at these folks. These are the folks on the harder days, because not every day of a marriage is an easy day. These are the folks you are going to turn to. And so for the witnesses, you have an immense responsibility to each member of this couple to stand by them. Traditionally, one is male and one is also Torah observant. And of course, in our tradition today, women or men, any gender, and who are and traditionally one is Jewish, right? And so we have a different understanding of what Torah observant means. But that is the traditional sense of it, and then how we think about a ketubah signing today. All the things that can happen during the ketubah signing is something called bedekin, right? Which is the veiling. And that comes from, the famous story of the mix-up with Leah and Rachel and Jacob, right? And there's this sense, but also it's a sense of humility. And some folks choose to not veil today for a whole variety of reasons, perhaps inequality and could be perceived that way. Other people, just like the look and it's beautiful, and also don't need to read back history into it in that same way. And if one is wearing a kippah, if the couple is where one could wear a kippah, sometimes I've seen the dual. So a wedding I have coming up, right? A groom is going to veil his bride, and then she is going to place, actually the reverse, before she's veiled, she's going to place the kippah on his head, and he is then going to veil her. So there's some reciprocal actions of getting oneself ready for the wedding, right? Of this kind of this beautiful back and forth action. Something that can also happen in a ketubah signing is, this is obviously depends on the age of the person getting married, but especially when folks are at an age where you know, it's where they might want to have a blessing from a parent or parents in the room. In this case, it is a beautiful thing that can happen, a family huddle, right? Family blessing. And so that's just it's kind of that time to say, like, you're off, I'm proud, Mazel Tov, you know, we love you. And we now see this expanded family around you. And it's a beautiful moment for Shechianu, right? For that blessing for new and sacred things. Questions up and up?
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So usually we move straight to chuppah and after a ketubah signing in a Jewish wedding. And so I didn't write anything down here, just gave you some pictures. And of course, if it had been presentation mode, you'd see this a little bit differently. But you know, what do you need for a chuppah to count? You need it to be open on all four sides, and you need to have a covering, right? So it is representative of a home. We often think about, right? It's a new home that you're creating. You're stepping into this new home as a couple, as husbands, as brides, as husband and wife, whatever it may be. And it doesn't, you know, it can be poles and you know, just a covering. It can be a talit. It doesn't have to be a talit. You know, sometimes folks will do family photos. It can be ornate, whatever it may be. What it can be four people holding a talit up high. I've done that. But the reason why we do this chuppah is, again, it's a representative of, it could be standing under God's presence, it could be this home, but the openness of it is not just so that it is easy for your family and friends to see you, which is nice, but it's also, again, I think representative of the type of home maybe that you want to create, right? Where then it has an open spirit to it. Right. And folks are welcome. And sometimes traditionally one's parents are underneath again, of a certain age, are underneath the chuppah with you. Because again, it's about a marriage of two family or the union of two families, partnership of two families, not just the couple. Sometimes there's something really beautiful about having folks actually physically have to hold it up. Right. And that's can be really symbolic. Again, we're not in this alone, and it takes work to hold this up. And you can think about, you know, it's particular significant family or friends holding it up too. Yes. All right.
And in South Africa and other parts of the world, the groom designates what they call pole holders. And whether they're physically holding it or they're standing next to it, if it's standing, there's no groomsman. You have your pole holders and your best man.
Ah.
Yes.
At,
Yeah.
at what point in the ceremony is the walking around 7 times?
Ooh, well, circling. And again, you wouldn't have this here if it was in
Oh,
present.
I'm sorry, I went too fast.
No,
Okay.
you didn't. No. So I put chuppah here first because often that's what you see. And in a lot of these pictures, there is a couple underneath. But often the circling happens like right before one really enters officially into this chuppah. So traditionally, a bride will circle a groom 7 times, and there's lots of different reasons for that, but it is most likely leaning in you know, she is creating a new home, like around, some tradition says 3 circles, some 7, but she's creating this circle around him. If 7, right, 7 is a number of wholeness in the Jewish tradition, and the world was created in 6 days, and 7th day God rested, right? So it's going to be a complete home. And again, in an egalitarian sense with two couples, we often have them. I just had a couple in here on Monday. We were practicing, right? One partner goes around 3 times, the other partner goes around 3 times, and they kind of do like a little do-si-do at the end. So they get the 7 in there if you want it to be equal, and you get a little bit of the do-si-do, right, in this image right here as well. So it is usually happens right before they enter into that chuppah. I've been seeing more and more, having more and more requests to do circling, and what that represents. But you might not see that at every single Jewish wedding that you go to. Then the couple is welcomed under the chuppah, and that's when the ceremony starts. So traditionally a Jewish wedding is in 2 parts, but most of the time when you go to a wedding today, you won't know that. It is as one, but you should know at one time in our history, it was separated into 2. So the first part was called erosin, which means like engagement, betrothal, and in some cases it may be called kiddushin. which is like the word kadosh, kiddush, kaddish, right? Holiness, or separation, sanctification, in some type of way. So those words are used interchangeably. And the second part is called nisuin, which is really the wedding, nuptials, and sometimes it's called chuppah, the second part as well. I didn't put that on here, but sometimes it's called chuppah. And so at one period of time, it could be up to a year between these two. We're talking, 2,000 years ago. It could be a year or a little bit less. Could be a year between these two. And the first one, again, from a really traditional point of view, was about that's really when the commitment to one another started. And remember, women weren't necessarily considered as, individuals, individual persons, I guess, as they are today. That, they were property at one point in time. And so at the point of Erusin, she was off limits, so to speak, from other men and just committed to him. And so this would be the betrothal period, and then nisuin, which would be the leading to eventual consummation of that relationship, would happen at some point in the future. So the first would be the agreement, where really kind of it's in stone. In fact, a get would be needed. A bill of divorce would be needed if for some reason, even if nisuin hadn't happened in our tradition. And over time, these two rituals kind of came closer and closer and closer together for a whole variety of reasons. The most significant of which is that if for some reason the man would die, right, in this period of time, or something would happen, it's really leaving her in the lurch. She doesn't even have the opportunity to begin a family, and she's really, caught. She becomes what's known in our tradition as somebody who's kind of chained, lost, just not able to get a get. If the person is dead, obviously, then it's not necessary. But if for some reason something happened in the ancient world where he wouldn't be found, she would be kind of cut off from any type of ability to support herself, and would be able to marry again. So these rituals become less than 2,000 years ago, really become together. And the only reason I bring up that these are two separate is because oftentimes you will see two kiddush cups at a wedding, and that is a nod to the fact that these used to be two different ceremonies, both of which had a sanctification blessing over fruit of the vine. Right, so one is part of the Sheva Brachot, the 7 blessings. We'll talk about that later, which is kind of the core part of Nisuin, and you'll see a cup for that. And the first one is just as a regular B'rei Pri Hagafen that stands on its own with the Nisuin, with the Erusin blessing rather. Sometimes you'll have one cup because, again, it is really one ceremony. But if you see 2 cups, that is why, because at one point in time in our tradition, these were 2 separate ceremonies. So a little bit more about what happens during Erusin or Kiddushin. Like I mentioned, there is a blessing over the fruit of the vine. There's also a blessing over the marriage. And then finally, there is the exchange of oftentimes a ring. This is something called kinyan, which essentially means like something's been acquired, right? And so it's an object of value, and over time, especially given just the landscape of every other wedding out there outside of Judaism too, this became a ring, but it wasn't necessarily always a ring. And it is accompanied by traditionally a groom only saying this to a bride, but today each member of the couple says it to one another. It's Hare Ata Mikudash Li, or Hare At Mikudeshet Li, on and on and on. Kedat Moshe Yisrael, according to the tradition or the laws of Moses and Israel. And so this is the blessing that's often said with the exchange of rings. Oftentimes you will see a ring actually go on what we call the ring finger, but in a traditional sense, and you see it in this picture, again, you can see the henna on her. It will actually go on the left, eventually it can make its way over, but it'll go on the left index finger, because we're taught there's a straight line to the heart, right? So you often will see in a traditional set, is that what you were going to say, Lorraine, too? Yes. Yeah, so sorry. I didn't mean to steal your thunder there.
I wanted to know because that's how it was done. I didn't know the reason.
Yeah, so it's just this idea of like, it's really, kind of, it's intense, it's connected to the heart, and that's what that's about. So, but you might see that, it might still be on the 4th finger. It doesn't make it wrong if one is not doing it one way or the other, but if you see that, and then at some point, the bride or the groom will switch their ring on over there. And so again, that is traditionally just groomed to a bride, giving them a ring. But again, we have equalized, egalitarianized that ritual. There's actually Rachel Adler wrote in her book, the name is escaping me, but she, since the basic is about acquiring essentially her through this objective value from a traditional point of view, a halakhic point of view too. She created a different ritual where it gets away from the wedding concept, the acquiring concept at all, and she creates a whole different ceremony that is really about shutafut, it's about partnership, business partnership, where both members of the couple will put an object of value into a bag, and then together they lift it. Because in the Talmud, there are cases where business partnerships are created by doing that, saying like we're both putting stuff in, right? We're both investing, and let's lift up the investment together. And so she put that out there in her book where she was trying to create new ritual. In the light of trying to especially lift up women, to say this should be used. I have never been to a wedding where that actually happened, except participated in one because I did it at mine. But I've never seen it done again. We lifted up, and then we still did the exchange of rings and the traditional hooray ata line. So there's just, there's some interesting things about, again, what actually constitutes a marriage, right? Is it about acquiring, or is it about partnership, right? Yes, Sue.
So can I just ask, what did you put in the bags? Like,
Rings.
The rings in, and then.
Yeah, we put the rings in the bag, and then it's like a beautiful little
Beautiful, yeah.
We lifted it up, and but it did not. The ritual did not take off, almost 20 years ago. So that's okay. That's all right. Because I think that what we've done is we've reclaimed, folks have just reclaimed this section of the service, and even though it may have an origin in him acquiring her through an object of value, by from a very halakhic point of view, one could say it invalidates it by doing an exchange, but it doesn't necessarily. Most folks don't accept that by any means. They're just saying, you can add. It can be additive, right? He's giving one to her, she can give one to him. And then, of course, if we have folks of, the same sex, same gender, it's the same thing. So it really equalizes it. For the American Jewish tradition about needing an I do line, we don't have that in a traditional Jewish wedding, but a lot of folks feel like I need that line. And so if that's going to happen, it's usually here. And when asked, I will usually help them construct a line that comes from their ketubah already in terms of their commitment and pledges to one another. But that's usually here. And usually if a rabbi or clergy member or cantor is going to say something to the couple, it may happen here. But this is the end of Kiddushin or Erosin, service number 1, done. And you may not even notice. That's why often a rabbi will speak here, right, to separate the two. And then we go on to Nisuin, which means the wedding or the nuptials. In this case, the bulk of it is really Sheva Brachot and then the breaking of the glass. But Sheva Brachot is really the bulk of it. And I didn't bring you all the 7. You can look up Sheva Brachot or 7 Blessings line to see the actual full text, because especially when you get to the end, the 7th blessing is particularly long. So I didn't want to take up the whole screen. But what you will see here in this outline of the 7 blessings is kind of a building, right? You start with the blessing we always start with, right? This is a joyous moment. We're going to bless the wine here. But then you're going to see, we start by blessing God, right? Of course, God needs praise. And we move on to the 3rd blessing. And not just does God need praise, but God needs praise because God created human beings, right? The very, very, very first human beings. And not only did God create these human beings, but God created human beings in the divine image, but B'Tselem Elohim, right? And we're going to celebrate that. And then there's a blessing for the hope for the future. The traditional blessing is really about Zion, meaning Israel, meaning Jerusalem, right? Zion being bereft, being barren, and then suddenly there's a possibility of something new. And so what it is it's really about hope, right? By this couple coming together and creating love with one another, and perhaps maybe a family with one another, right? That's very hopeful, right? And so the image again is of of Israel as a barren woman, which can be problematic, but is an often used image in the biblical tradition for, what does it mean to move from hopelessness to hope? And so that's the Sheva Brachot builds on that with the fifth blessing, but ultimately, again, it's about hope for the future. The sixth blessing says, that hope for the future is embedded in this couple in particular, right? We're gonna bless this chatan and this kala, this couple, and then in that much longer blessing, by the time we get to the seventh blessing, is about it's happiness for this couple. But also, this is going to lead to shouts of joy throughout the streets of Jerusalem and all throughout Israel and beyond, right? And so there's this cosmic connection. You are going right back to that original couple, right? You are just as important as Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve. You are just as important, right? That very first marriage, so to speak, right? That happened, right? You're just as important to them, and just as they created a future, so too does this new couple have the ability to do that. And of course, that will bring joy throughout the land. And so that's the seven blessings. The way that plays out today is one can have them chanted or said in Hebrew and in English. A lot of folks may choose an alternative translation, just kind of updating for these times. Maybe not. I think the imagery is beautiful as is, but a lot of folks may not want to talk about Jerusalem as a barren woman or Zion as a barren woman, and so we'll create an alternative especially around that fifth blessing. This is a great place for 7 individuals that are close to a family to each take a blessing, and either in the Hebrew or the English or the alternative English. It's especially if you don't have a traditional wedding party. This is where, again, 7 people may get up and say something, or in addition to a traditional wedding party. Other things that can happen often will happen in this section, additional readings, additional songs. It can be quite beautiful to insert the priestly blessing here, B'kat Kohanim. This is not necessary to a Jewish wedding. Everything I've told you about so far, at least, blessing over wine, blessing over the marriage, something that's again, the ring wasn't necessary, but something in that moment, right, which is your commitment to one another, something that's said to one another. And the Sheva Brachot are all necessary parts of the Jewish wedding. This part isn't. It can still be, quote, kosher without the priestly blessing, but I often see the priestly blessing in Jewish weddings these days. It's our most ancient blessing. Threefold benediction, right? May God bless you and keep you. May God's light shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God's face always be turned to you and grant you peace, grant you shalom. And this is oftentimes when a couple will get covered with a talit. So, for the folks looking behind, right? They are now as one, right? So it can be really a beautiful, beautiful moment, especially if there's a talit that's meaningful, particularly meaningful, but it doesn't have to be. But it's just it's a unifying, beautiful unifying moment. And then a Jewish wedding traditionally concludes with breaking the glass, right? It can be like this picture has 2 folks breaking a glass. It can be 1 glass, it can be 2 glasses. It doesn't necessarily matter. Why do we do it? It makes a great noise. Like boom, it's done, right? It probably goes back to a superstition, honestly, that like loud noises are not only can be like yay, but loud noises also can drive away evil spirits. That's kind of probably back from a time that we don't necessarily, that's not necessarily how we think today, but that is probably a likely origin. Maybe same thing with the breaking of the plate, by the way. Probably very, very similar. Any type of shattering is usually in that boat. But usually we think about that as, even in times of great joy, this goes with our second possible reason listed here, of which there are many, by the way, not just these 3, but these are the 3 most popular. The breaking of the glass is a time for us to know that we carry sorrow with us, even in times of joy, and the reverse too, right? Even in times of sorrow, there can be joy as well. At a time of great mourning, we can still smile at a memory, right? And In this case, it's the reverse. And the one that I like the most, I think is probably most relevant to a couple who are just starting out on their journey together is, just as the cup can be shattered into, 1,000 pieces, one stray word, one anything, right, can shatter, the trust that's built. And we need to make sure that we are conscious of the fragility of relationships. And so we want to kind of do the reverse, right? Just as easily as a glass can be shattered, right? We want to make sure to protect the sanctity, the respect, the love that is in this marriage, right? So we're going to be delicate and gentle and always loving towards our partner. It's a little bit of the reverse, but it can usually work in the moment. But yeah, it's a time for, usually as soon as that glass is shattered, we get before that we get the pronouncement of an officiant that by the power vested in them by the state, and in a Jewish wedding, also by the tradition, that one is pronounced as this particular couple, and then we are instructed to share a mazel tov, a hearty mazel tov, right? And we get a recessional. But it doesn't end there. Weddings don't end there. I tell every couple, please take some time by yourself. You may want to immediately, turn to everyone, be with everybody, be at a cocktail hour, do whatever it is, photos. I know people do all sorts of things. I say take 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes. Find your own space to be alone. Make sure someone is guarding that door so people can't rush in. Take a little bit of time together, because even all those times that we've just reinforced you're not alone with our witnesses and maybe people holding the chuppah or whatever it may be, this marriage, we have to remember, like, these two people are in it at the same, like, we hold both. And so this is a great time, yichud, like echad, one, right? This is alone time. This is their time to be together. So at least 5 minutes. I even give couples practical tips, like if they can have like a plate of appetizers in that room, their own champagne in that room, give them an opportunity just to celebrate for a minute. If I'm going to be, we're going to go back in time. Traditionally, this is when a marriage is consummated. Please, I tell couples, let's not do that. Let's just take 5 minutes, enjoy a kiss and some champagne, and then come back on out, and all that can happen later. But traditionally, that was the original purpose of Yichud. Today, it's about making sure you remember who got married that day. And it's not just about the families, but it isn't about the couple.
I thought this was also where they broke their fast.
Yes, right. So that's why you're going to have your plate of food in there to make sure you're no longer suffering. Exactly. So traditionally, if you are fasting, that is when you would break the fast. And the food, hopefully prior to the champagne.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have this concept of trying to lift up every mitzvah, and adorn every mitzvah, make every mitzvah even more than just what it is. And so it is traditional to do a sudah, to do a meal, and in this case, to do so for the wedding. So to think through, various ways that your Judaism can be brought into the rest of the celebration that day. Just having a celebration is Jewish, of whatever, it can just be a meal on one's own, or it can be, some elaborate gathering. But, try to, things I might share with couples are, like do a motzi, get a challah, do all those things. And then it is traditional to have some dances. There's lots of different dances one could do, but the hora being the most popular, and the lifting up on chairs, which is not just for b'nai mitzvah, is also for a couple. It's terrifying. It's not necessary. You're still married if you don't get up on that chair. But it can be a really fun way, a really Jewish way to continue the celebration. So let me put down my screen share for the moment. And, we just really quickly walk through all the basics in a part of a Jewish wedding. But are there questions or other things that you were expecting, or, anything in that vein?
That was great. I mean, of course, we've seen them all and know that and are familiar with them. When I got married, it was 45 years ago, and we were, there wasn't video cameras and everything, but somebody turned on a tape recording,
Oh.
and I was actually married at my brother's home, and he was sitting with his maybe 4-year or 5-year-old son, and I hear him, and they're saying, why did you break the glass? And it was that they should be happily married as long as it takes them to
Put it back
those
together.
pieces back together. And I love that one too, because of course it was just crumbles of glass. So I
love that one.
remember my mother and my brother telling Aaron that story. So yeah.
No matter how many times you see it and go and just the whole experience of it, I'm still sitting here with tears in my eyes. I just, it's just so beautiful. So beautiful. I love the idea of what you were saying, Rabbi, about the getting up on the chairs, the idea that no matter how beautiful the moment is, we want to even lift it up more, make it even more beautiful. It's so wonderful. I got goosebumps.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the whole thing with the plates, and I know, let's see, this Orthodox community in Edmonton, Alberta, still does it the way we used to do it in South Africa. The two mothers, so
Mhm.
they'd have the bride and groom, and then the two mothers would hold the plates together and
That's
then
what we
shatter
did.
them. Yeah,
Yes,
and
I did that for both of my kids.
okay, and we don't, so we have a word, right? Machetenasta. In English, there is no word to describe your in-laws. I
No.
wish there was an English word, but there isn't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's your child's in-law. It's strange. We don't have a direct
Yeah.
relationship like there
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just so many different ways to lift up joy in this moment, and whether one is, 25 getting married or 45 getting married or 75 getting married or whatever it is, right? These rituals are all just all beautiful at all ages, and I love them. I love them. It's a really, like you said, it's a gift. And I also, as I think about a wedding and prepare a couple for a wedding and or reflect on my own wedding, it's a lot of joy. Yeah. Any other questions or?
I love, can you share some of the non-traditional ways that you've seen or been
Yeah.
participated in to
Um,
make this your own? And
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that definitely, if there are existing children, as long it all depends on the dynamics of that particular relationship. There's definitely been blessings that have been created to blessing over the extended family unit, depending on the age. Sometimes folks have not just a blessing, but may say words to the children, or the children sometimes say words to um, the new spouse or the person about to be the spouse of their parent. That's usually been a very meaningful and powerful moment. And again, it always depends on dynamics in the family and ages, and um, but usually that can bring a lot of joy. Like I said, I've seen a lot done around the 7 blessings, alternative 7 different things that are usually on theme with the same theme of the 7 blessings, but have been really expanded upon. So there are 7 things that they wish for the couple. And then Sheva Brachot, by the way, traditionally are shared at meals all throughout the week following. Today we have like a culture of folks go off and leave and they're on their own on a honeymoon, but traditionally it wasn't so, and it may not be so in every case today. And so whenever folks are able to kind of continue the celebration, whether it's immediately afterwards for a couple of meals, or maybe after a honeymoon, they come back and have a party for more people who couldn't be at whatever it may be, the Sheva Brachot are usually can be shared again in their traditional form, or again in this kind of alternative 7, 7 blessings, 7 wishes, 7 sayings of encouragement for the couple, that kind of thing. And then again, I would say the other really meaningful thing is usually when there's been a loss that that loss is usually noted towards the beginning of the ceremony, thinking about those who are not here, but we know might not physically be there, especially if it's a parent or somebody, but are certainly there, or a sibling, certainly there in spirit. So that is usually another necessary moment for those folks who've had those experiences in life prior to marriage. Trying to think if there are other.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I thought, and I mean, I know for both of my kids who are Orthodox, it was my understanding, and I must be incorrect about it, that the tradition is that the new couple does not go on a honeymoon, that for the 7 days after, the
Yes.
community takes care of them in that
Yeah.
there's a dinner, and that's what I thought, really thinking.
No, you're right. Yeah. So
Oh.
from a traditional point of view, I was just thinking, I think a lot of couples today,
Oh.
couples that I encountered often will go off, kind of I would say it's an American tradition. Might be beyond America, but I would say a modern tradition
Yeah.
is folks immediately go off. But yes, from a traditional point of view, you stick around for that week, right? And then you have the Sheva Brachot shared at each one of those gatherings. The joy continues. It spills over. It's not a one-day affair.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And that they don't have to do any work, that these meals are made for them, and like you said, the celebration continues. Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Kind of the same as after somebody's died and you're sitting Shiva, then the community's supposed to bring you the food and you're not supposed to do anything. I
Yeah.
think, like
Yeah.
in a
And
similar way.
and it's interesting that way, right? They're, completely opposite events. But it is, and you could make the same argument for after a birth, maybe not in a formalized sense, but yeah, we go and we,
Yeah.
but it's all because it's all the same, right? It's one of the ways that communities can show love, right? Communities can show care, right? We're saying it's a way to get us close, right, to the person who's actually the mourner, or the bride of the groom, right, or the new parent, whatever it may be, right? It's our way to say we might not be able to make it better, in the time, right? Or, we can't necessarily do anything more to help the couple off, but we can show up in person and, shower them with food.
Thing that really greatly disturbed me some years ago, I went to a very religious wedding, and it wasn't a regular veil. The bride's face is covered like solid. You couldn't see anything. She had to be led. And I don't understand that.
Huh.
I've never been, yeah. And they do it a lot of times, Chabad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah,
it,
one is truly veiled. I mean, if you go back to the, origin story, right? Jacob couldn't tell the difference. It was that much. It was like a true veil, right? And there's a lot to be said for, what's that all about, and right, and how much agency, does she have, right? If she needs to be led to somewhere, she doesn't even know where she's going, and can't certainly, not only can she not be seen, but the groom can't be seen in that traditional sense. Whoever she's marrying can't be seen, and yeah, so I would say most folks that we see today in this community, there's either no veil, or it's you can still make out everything. The person is still recognizable, and they can still act with agency and walk themselves wherever they need to go.
yeah, it was very disturbing to me.
Yeah, yeah. And we didn't talk about, kind of the difference in culture from place to place too. I remember some of my favorite memories is being in Israel, being in a hotel and overlooking a wedding. And like it is joyous and loud usually. And, and it's 10 p.m. and they're just getting married, and I'm confused because I'm going to bed. And, it's very, what we get used to in different places, wherever we may have grown up or whatnot, is not necessarily the same place to place. But either way, what is it all about? That's what it comes down to. And all the things that we shared today are the basics, that would be in a wedding that then get elaborated upon and expanded depending on who the couple is, who the officiant is, what's the culture surrounding it.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wish you, as we talk about weddings, a lot of joy and partnership and, just anything that will make you celebrate and want to say Mazel Tov at the end of it all. So I know some of you are very close to Jewish weddings or various different things. So for those of you who are, yay, Mazel Tov in advance. And let me know if you have any questions.